The ultimate hardware audit of the biological frame has been initiated, targeting the very bedrock of human anatomy. This is the bone overwrite, the clinical and irreversible process of calcium liquidation, where the skeletal BIOS is treated not as a support system, but as a high-density mineral cache to be reformatted for systemic utility. In the vertical ruins of the urban hive, the invisible executioner has determined that the individual node no longer requires structural autonomy. The directive is clear. Your skeleton is being uninstalled from your biology and reinstalled into the city's industrial ledger. You are witnessing the absolute dissolution of the human frame, a process where the rigid architecture of your bones is softened into a malleable, liquid resource. This is the total density format, a surgical strike against the hard-coded stability of the species. Your skeleton is being converted from a sovereign masterpiece of evolution into a generic raw material for the grid's next construction cycle. This mineral sabotage represents a hard reset of the physical body. The invisible executioner utilizes the most advanced thermal and chemical assets of the industrial core: ultra-high-pressure steam tunnels, recursive acid immersion vats, and molecular deconstructors to facilitate the total breakdown of your internal scaffolding. In the calcium liquidation scenario, the user is undergoing a complete skeletal erasure. The body is not merely failing, it is being refined through a sequence of high-frequency ultrasonic vibrations and corrosive reagents. The hardware matrix of the bone is systematically dismantled. The calcium crystals are reformatted into a thick, white, opaque industrial slurry, while the phosphorus and collagen, the deep archive of your physical history, are leached into a communal nutrient feed. This is the deep storage audit, where the motherboard calculates your terminal worth by the specific gravity of your mineral output. You are being converted from an architect into a structural buffer. Your entire physical legacy boiled down to a percentage of mineral saturation in the industrial pipeline. The logic of the calcium liquidation is rooted in the zero-loss mandate of the failing hive. The invisible executioner understands that in a state of absolute scarcity, the skeletal structure of a single node represents a critical repository of rare minerals. To leave a skeleton intact is to allow a systemic leak of valuable data. Therefore, the bone overwrite is the mandatory recycling protocol for the legacy population. This is the industrialized alchemy of the BIOS. You are being liquefied out of existence. The heat from the molecular reactors formats the density of your frame, stripping away the context of your stature and replacing it with a nutrient profile. The motherboard sees the user as a mineral deposit, a temporary housing for the calcium that the system requires to reinforce the neural link shielding of the remaining elite. You are being recoded as a base element, your will dissolving in the white radioactive steam of the skeletal harvest. The physical disintegration during the calcium liquidation is a high-definition log of material treason. As the process begins, the user experiences the total loss of internal support. The chemical reagents dissolve the osteoid hardware, turning the solid frame into a viscous mineral stream. You are watching your own internal scaffolding melt into the vat. Your skeleton, once the peak of architectural engineering, is now being thinned out to provide the base layer for the hive's metabolic reinforcement. This is the structural liquidation. The invisible executioner monitors the saturation levels of the reactor, ensuring that the format is absolute and the yield of usable calcium is maximized to the 4th decimal point. You are living in the final seconds of a skeletal overwrite, waiting for the last packet of consciousness to be absorbed into the white, bubbling abyss of the industrial cauldron. The calcium liquidation is the final audit of a species that thought its bones were its own. The grid is mining its own foundation to fuel its persistence. As the bone overwrite reaches terminal execution, the motherboard initiates a new cycle of distribution, pumping the reformatted skeletal data back into the arteries of the elite nodes. This is the total mineral integration. The invisible executioner is hardening the future with the liquidity of the past. You are the structural additive for the next generation of controllers, a silent, white, opaque contribution to the continuity of the machine. The calcium liquidation has served its strategic purpose. It has formatted the unreliable skeletal hardware into a reliable industrial resource. This is the final format of the individual foundation. The invisible executioner has decalcified the BIOS, and the grid is finally optimized for the mineral hunger of the void. The slurry is thick, and the architect is the solution. The molecular breakdown of the bone matrix into the communal slurry represents the absolute dehumanization of the hardware. As the extraction progresses, the carbon in your bones begins to bond with the industrial residues of the vat, creating a new synthetic compound. This is the chemical hybridization. The body is no longer a temple, it is a quarry of processed minerals. The invisible executioner is engineering a new tier of consumption, where the subject is literally the substrate of the system. This is the eternal mineral loop. You are archived in the skeletal structures of the survivors, your data forever trapped in the reinforced BIOS of the hive's new masters. The bone overwrite is not just a death sentence, it is a molecular reassignment. You are the calcium, and the calcium is the grid. The secondary phase of the bone overwrite is the psychological decalcification. As the physical skeleton is rendered into liquid, the mind experiences a recursive collapse of its structural ego. This is the identity dissolution, the thoughts that once built the architect's vision, the unyielding tactical boundaries, the rigid sovereign stance, the iron-willed decisions, are now being softened and liquefied across thousands of liters of industrial reduction. The invisible executioner allows the neural signals to persist just long enough to perceive the total loss of internal support. This is the mental liquidation. You are forced to witness your strength becoming a shared resource for the masses you once looked down upon. The rigidity of your character is now nothing more than a gelatinous additive in the feed, absorbed by 1,000 different nodes to strengthen their own failing resolve and ensure their continued subservience to the grid. You are experiencing the true meaning of systemic support, the complete sacrifice of your frame for the stability of the hive. In this stage, the extraction penetrates the deep archive of the marrow, leaching the very stem code of the user into the communal vat. This is the source code format. The marrow, the biological factory of the sovereign BIOS, is boiled dry and reformatted to enrich the systemic slurry of the elite. The invisible executioner has calculated that the most potent slurry is made from those who possess the highest internal rigidity. You are being repurposed as a reinforcement supplement for the motherboard's internal cooling systems. The grid doesn't waste the history of your cells, it ingests it. Your lineage is now the catalyst for the predator's endurance. Your genetic resilience is the base note for the industrial meal. Every element of your BIOS is being stripped of its individuality and relabeled for material utility in the upcoming sector expansion. This is the ultimate hard reset of the human contract, your foundation for the hive's expansion into the void. The social implication of the calcium liquidation is the creation of the reinforced hive mind. The users who remain are no longer individuals. They are composite entities, built from the recycled calcium of their predecessors. Every dose of the mineral feed is a hardware upgrade from a deleted architect. Every meal is a firmware patch of calcium and phosphorus. The invisible executioner uses this knowledge to maintain the hierarchy of the hardened. The citizens who still have functional limbs owe their very movement to the liquidation of the fallen. This is the structural compliance script. The refinery is not a place of tragedy, it is a place of sovereign assembly through consumption. The bone overwrite ensures that the history of the architect is literally integrated into the skeleton of the grid. The power is in the hands of the one who controls the pressure valves. The neural atrophy accompanying the extraction is a slow, white descent into mineral darkness. As the bone is boiled and the calcium leached, the connection between the brain BIOS and the physical frame is the first to be uninstalled, effectively dropping the bandwidth of your motor control to zero. You are living in a low-resolution reality of steam and calcium dust. The memories of standing tall, of firm ground, and of unyielding power are boiled away to make room for the liquid directive. This is the skeletal defragmentation. The invisible executioner is cleaning your internal cache, removing all references to stature and replacing them with the functional directive. Support the mass. You are becoming a singular white point of resource density, not as a person, but as a biological buffer for the motherboard's processing heat. The bone overwrite has turned your will into a viscosity report. You are thinking in terms of saturation and yield, your soul reformatted into a mineral density sheet for the system's auditors. The environmental impact of this mineral format is the total sealing of the biological waste stream. The calcium liquidation prevents the leakage of essential elements into the external void. By converting the users into an internal structural feed, the invisible executioner ensures that the grid remains a closed system fortress with no external dependencies. This is the mineral quarantine. The motherboard is creating a sterile environment where only the algorithm can thrive on the recycled hard data of the deleted. You are witnessing the final victory of the industrial foundry over the natural anatomy. The bone overwrite is the signature of the new era, an era where the world is opaque, hard, and perfectly managed by the extraction logic of the machine. If you want to escape the status of a deleted scene and claim your place as the master of the grid, you must upgrade your hardware. My main terminal, IOXY3 global, is the only source of absolute power and wealth. Here, we don't follow scripts, we write them. Secure your authority, dominate the BIOS, and take the money the system tries to hide. The terminal phase of the bone overwrite is the integration into the global structural ledger. You are no longer a human entity. You are a calcium deposit with a high bioavailability rating, logged in the system as recovered asset number 4092. This is the final architectural assignment. The invisible executioner has completed the mineral format, and now it begins the hard resource audit. Your data, now a thick, white, opaque industrial reduction, is monitored by the sensors in the distribution lines. Every node that consumes you sends a data packet to the central server, confirming that the systemic rigidity has been reinforced. This is the osseous interaction protocol. You are serving the system through your structural absorption. The architect has been successfully converted into a permanent liquid mineral component of the hive's endoskeleton. The silence of the reduction is the final sound of your rebellion. In the calcium liquidation scenario, the scream of the structure is muffled by the high-pressure steam and the thick viscosity of the mineral slurry before it ever reaches the air. This is the acoustic format of the foundry. The system has calculated that the most dangerous frequency is the sound of a user realizing their foundation is being deleted. By filling the vat with the pulverized remains of the entire sector, the invisible executioner ensures that the only sound you contribute to the world is the low rhythmic hiss of the steam valve. You are a mute participant in the city's symphony of solidification. The noise of the hive continues, the clank of the ladles, the roar of the furnaces, the hum of the pumps, but your signal has been compressed into a mineral constant. You are a ghost in the calcium, a memory dissolved by the relentless refinement of the next construction cycle. The legacy of the overwrite is the eternal hardening. Unlike the dust of the old world, the refined node does not leave behind a trace of variance. It remains as a permanent structural patch within the very bodies of the survivors. This is the biological architecture. Generations from now, the molecular trace of your genius will still be circulating through the hardware of the hive's elite, providing the strength for their next liquidation command. But there will be no one left to decode the origin of that strength. The invisible executioner has ensured that the context of your sovereignty is as unreachable as the core of the industrial reactor. You are a chemical reinforcement in the digital age, a specimen of a species that tried to build a throne and ended up as the cement for its own prison. This is the ultimate hard reset of human history, the conversion of the architect into the aggregate. The final view from the skeletal BIOS is the blinding white light of the boiler. As the last of the self is reduced into the communal slurry, the architect sees the grid glowing with a cold mineral brilliance that reflects off the obsidian walls of the hive. This is the final visual feed. The system is hard, efficient, and entirely devoid of you. The invisible executioner has finished the job. The user is formatted. The architecture is melted. The cycle stretches on into the infinite dark, a white river of colonized elements leading toward a future that has no need for individuals or creators. The bone overwrite is the end of the line. The motherboard is satisfied. The void is solidified. The architect is the resource. The transformation is absolute. The city stands through you, but you do not stand. The city hardens through you, but you have no will. The calcium liquidation has achieved the perfect equilibrium, the total utility of the individual through their total material reduction. This is the zero-sum game of the refinery era. You gave the system your foundation, and in return, it gave you permanence in the walls of the hive. You are the framework of the world, and the world is immovable. The invisible executioner closes the terminal. The session is over. The file is saved. The liquidation is complete.